What it do? Welcome to the Three Dudes Fantasy Football Show. We are in it, one game down. They're balling in Brazil, and we got Sunday and Monday to talk about, and of course, overreact to everything that we saw on Thursday night football. The drafts are in. We're gonna get your feelings on your fantasy drafts because if you're like me, you're already messed up and your season's over. It's okay. We are in the same boat. But what we got to talk about is what we saw last night. What a fantastic game. Kansas City, Baltimore, opening the season in KC, 27-20 win for the Chiefs. The toe of Isaiah Likely, the difference in that game from Baltimore going for two to win the game. Kind of what we saw on that game is it's really more the same. Is Baltimore is a really good team. Kansas City is still stacked on both sides of the football. I didn't my opinions of both those teams didn't change. I think that could easily be an AFC Championship game match, but you see the way I think teams are going to play the Ravens this year. Really try to take away Derrick Henry, make Lamar Jackson do a lot, which is great for fantasy football, but I think teams are okay if he's running for a lot of yards, taking hits, not comfortable in the pocket. But just your guys' takeaways from an amazing game to start the season, Aaron. What do you think of that Thursday night football game?
Oh man, it's another matchup of the two colossal quarterbacks, and one can't beat the other. But it was really interesting to see Kansas City on defense. For as much change they had, they still look really good. A little bit of Baltimore's O line is kind of questionable. There's some interesting things there, but overall it was a great game. So a
Yeah,
really good
Lamar
one to kick off the
Jackson
season.
one
Yeah,
in
no,
five against Patrick Mahomes. And Mahomes is the quarterback we've watched in his career. He's going to make everyone around him better. When he's had great players, they do great things. So him and Tyreek Hill, him and Travis Kelce. But now he has an offense with Rashee Rice, who was phenomenal. Xavier Worthy, 3 touches, 2 touchdowns. And is this a team, Steve, when you look at Kansas City, specifically Xavier Worthy, is he flex worthy every week now just for that potential of one big play?
I mean, yeah, you're not going to get the usage they're getting out of Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce because he ended the game with 2 catches and then the reverse. So, play type, it wasn't huge, but he had 2 touchdowns, and that's kind of what you're hoping for him. So it is the Tyreek Hill factor, right? Like when Tyreek Hill was coming up, that's what we expected from him. I think that's what you can expect from Xavier Worthy. And unless your team is stacked at wide receiver, like you drafted 6 in the first 7 rounds, I think you have to start Xavier Worthy.
Yeah, probably even
Yes,
slide him into a wide receiver spot at
yeah,
point.
that was a little dig at JJ there. Just
You know me. I I we talked about it. We did our draft prep shows, all the specials. I went all in on wide receivers, and we're gonna get to that in a second about how I already messed up the fantasy football draft. But the biggest thing coming from that game, fantasy
Barkley
wise,
just scored again.
oh,
Saquon
wow.
Barkley. What a second round pickup there, man. Saquon Barkley is going to destroy leagues. Like this is such a home run. Him in Philadelphia. Of course, Packers and Eagles balling in Brazil right now. Is Isaiah Likely versus Mark Andrews. Ton of reaction, social media blowing up today. The fantasy football world trying to figure it out. The one thing we do know is Isaiah Likely is talented. He is going to be a part of this offense. He has to be a part of this offense because there's a chance he could be their second best pass catcher. And whether you want to say it's Zay Flowers, Likely, Flowers, Andrews, like he is someone that they have to have involved on the offense to create big plays. So he goes 9 catches, 111 yards, and a touchdown on 12 targets. Andrews, 2 for 14 on 2 targets. And I'll go to our Andrews owner in our big league, Steve. I did see a lot of people though pumping the brakes. Like it's game one. It wasn't a total changing of the guard. It looked like reading the film breakdowns and people that Kansas City did scheme for Andrews, but I think what this shows is we're probably going to have to lower our expectations for Mark Andrews.
Yeah, so I'll play both sides, right? So as the panicked Mark Andrews owner, I'm sitting there going, Isaiah Likely he's taking over. He's the future. Um, like, oh my God, sell Andrews, sell Andrews. Now, the
Me.
rational. So that was me last night, right? Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I drafted Andrews. The rational side of my brain did take over. So yeah, Andrews did outsnap him. We can even see in that missed touchdown to Zay Flowers, Andrews was triple covered. That's why Zay Flowers was so open in the back of the end zone, is because everybody flowed to Andrews' side. So Kansas City schemed taking Andrews away and said somebody else has to beat us, and likely did. My thought process is, grand scheme, we always say a team can only sustain 2 targets, and I still believe that. However, in this scenario, because 2 of the 3 targets are tight ends, I think you're okay if you start Likely or Andrews. I think we probably overdrafted Andrews at this point, but I still think he's going to end up as a top 10 tight end. He just probably won't be that 3 or 4 that we were hoping he would be. He's probably going to end up in that 6 to 7. And like I said earlier before we got on this, this kind of reminds me of that Bill Belichick offense where they had Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez. Every week they both had points. Some weeks it was Gronk and some weeks it was Aaron Hernandez. You're going to start one of them. You probably don't want to own both of them, because you don't want to be playing that Russian roulette. But if you didn't draft tight ends, and we had a guy in our league who didn't, and he punted on tight end, that's the guy I'm going to go pick up because he has the potential to do that. And I don't.
Ceiling weeks out of
Right,
it.
you're going to get ceiling, and if you punt it on tight end, that's what you're looking for. So, as the Andrews owner, I'm not panicking until week 3 because I did read a little bit that I didn't know about. He was in a car accident 3 weeks ago, and it was, I guess, a significant car accident. I can't speak on it much, but I did read that it was a significant car accident. He's probably not 100%, but he did outsnap Isaiah Likely. We'll see how it goes. If
Yeah,
this continues into week 3, I panic.
yeah, they did the right thing in the second half. Likely was outplaying Andrews, and so when they went to 11 personnel, when that was 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, it was 8-5 in the second half of Likely being on the field over Andrews because he was playing that well. And I'm with you. It's just you lower the expectations for Mark Andrews. You hope to see a stable floor because they need pass catchers desperately in that offense. And if they're going to let Lamar Jackson throw the football as much as he's been throwing the football, then they can become viable. But Aaron, if you're one of those guys in the waiver wire and fab leagues, a lot more fab leagues when you're using your free agent budget, what are you thinking? Are we going 12, 15%, or would you go higher? And, as Steve said, if you're trying to chase that tight end, if you have to put money out week 1, how much are you willing to pay for Isaiah Likely?
I mean, that one's a tough one. It really depends on your team. Like if you desperately need that tight end, that's gonna take you over, make your team great. I wouldn't hesitate to put 20%, maybe possibly even for the most part chips all in on Isaiah Likely. Not the whole budget, but there's gonna be some people that are putting in a lot for him just based off that performance.
What would
And
you? What
no,
percentage would you say? Like, what is your percentage that you're like, because you're saying chips all in. If somebody's listening to the show, what's chips all in mean?
I
20.
would,
If we have $100 budget, what are you putting in?
if you're desperate for a tight end, I would probably, and this is going to fix your team, likely is probably like 30 to 40 for me. If you're going to put it,
So you're taking
you need a tight end
I
because
think I agree with that.
I think the landscape for tight end is going to be interesting. What we saw last night was Likely has the athletic ability and the size that team needs desperately. It's like Mark Andrews is athletic and a large target, but Likely looks more of a athletic player. So it's like, luckily he came back. He did hurt his shoulder. It looked like.
It came down pretty hard.
As long as he stays healthy, Likely will definitely get you points. But like I said, if you need a tight end, I think I would go for him.
That's fair.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say I probably wouldn't put. We're saying 30%, but we also need to see what else pans out, right? If a Puka Nakua or a Kyron Williams shows up, those are the players that are probably more interest and will gain more, and then you need to change. So, yeah, on Friday night, as we're still sitting here and we've played one game, and Isaiah Likely had a big game. We've been playing fantasy long enough to remember Kyle Ogletree having 3
I'm
touchdowns,
glad
13 catches, and 170 yards.
What was it?
But
Yeah,
likely,
Kevin Ogletree, 3 touchdowns was the hottest ad. I remember that.
But likely
So-
was a big part of that offense second half of last season. Like
Oh, for
He
sure.
was. He was. And
I don't think this is a flash in the pan. Like you're
No.
chasing this. Like this is going to be this ceiling week that you're chasing. But it was evident watching that game. He has to be involved. Like they need playmakers on the perimeter desperately.
they do.
So just think about it. It's where you are as a tight end, or even if you want to be aggressive and maybe sneak one from one of your league mates early in the season. But these are things we're going to be watching coming into this weekend. For me, being the Derrick Henry owner, I'm kind of in that same boat where you have to take a step back and go, all right, what was the game plan? And to me, Kansas City took Derrick Henry out of that game, and they were okay with Lamar Jackson having 122 rushing yards, getting out of the pocket because they didn't allow him to be comfortable. And if Lamar Jackson is running that much, yeah, it's great for your fantasy team, but he's taking some hits. He's hitting the ground a lot. He's having to make decisions outside the pocket. And I think that's what actually you want Lamar Jackson to be doing. So I'm kind of in that same boat. And we have to talk about Derrick Henry owners in this 13 carries, only 3.5 yards per carry. To me, he is super touchdown dependent, though, with what I saw to Justice Hill. I think just like Mark Andrews, I think we have to lower the expectations a little bit for Derrick Henry. And Baltimore has to figure this out because that was the easiest tell of the game. Like, I don't understand why teams just don't throw 3 or 4 times when Derrick Henry's on the roster. Why they make it such a thing to where he can't catch passes. He had 2 targets. He didn't catch them. But when Justice Hill was in the game, it was 8 targets, 6 catches, 52 yards. Yeah, they were chasing it a little bit in the second half. That is such a big tell that Baltimore's going to have to figure that out. But it showed me, if you're a Derrick Henry owner, then you need to probably figure out Justice Hill on your roster. But Hill could be something in PPR leagues. What do you guys think about what we saw out of those 2 running backs?
I agree and disagree. I know it's going to sound weird. So I agree Justice Hill is definitely a third down back and you should definitely roster him. However, Baltimore's not going to be in a lot of negative game scripts. I mean, they went toe-to-toe with Kansas City. And the reason Justin Tucker missed a field goal, we don't expect that, right? Like there's just a lot of things that went weird in that game. Derrick Henry had 5 carries that first drive and then finished the rest of the game had 8. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think he's going to, not get as many looks. I just think that game felt like it got away. I mean, they were chipping Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews all night because Kansas City was blitzing so much. And at halftime, Lamar Jackson had a 0.8 air yards was his average distance of throw. He wasn't even throwing it a yard down the field. So I just think that game was weird. It's good for them to look back on. I don't think that's how most of their games are going to go. Baltimore's too good. They're going to be ahead in a lot of games, and Derrick Henry's probably going to get a lot more carries. Because that first drive, they looked amazing, and they did exactly like they moved Derrick Henry out of the backfield at one point to run a sneak with Lamar Jackson. That's what they can do with Derrick Henry is cause, oh, we're running. Oh, look, we passed. And I think we'll see more of that.
It's it's the ultimate chess match because you think back to the AFC Championship game when they totally abandoned the run against Kansas City.
And they did it again.
That's a bad habit of theirs. But yeah, the whole Derrick Henry thing, watching him that game, it's I definitely still see Derrick Henry scoring touchdowns. For yardage, it's really gonna be hit or miss in my opinion.
I think he becomes a lot more touchdown dependent than
he is
in this offense. And I get it's Kansas City and they are good defense. That's why they won the Super Bowl last year, is because their defense carried them until the offense really figured it out in the postseason. But that's why it's TNF hot takes, baby. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean that's it. I just don't want to overreact too much to one game, because it didn't feel like Baltimore's offense looked bad at times, and it looked like it was Lamar Jackson figured it out because we don't have an offensive line, and I don't think that'll be continuing.
We shall see what happens moving forward. But Thursday night hot takes as we continue our fantasy spin. Draft season has come and gone. Thank you very much for all the fun, all the content, and raise your hand if you already hate what you did in your draft. Yeah, that's me. It's okay. Um, we can be together about that. But when it comes to draft season, I just want to get you guys' feelings on the drafts that you had, and start with you, Aaron, just in terms of the players that you kind of had the most shares of. Who were some of the guys that you ended up realizing that were always on your roster this fantasy draft season?
Let's see. Someone that's been pretty common on my roster, surprisingly enough, has been Kyler Murray and DK Metcalf. I've kind of fallen in love where Kyler Murray's kind of fallen in a few drafts, and just the upside, of his rushing abilities and the offense. Kind of interested to see where it goes. Those are two players. DK, they're going to pass the ball, new coordinator, all that stuff. So I want to see how he does. I like DK a lot, so he's been one that I've definitely tried to target if I had the chance. If he wasn't drafted before me, I get to draft him. So, but those are two guys that I've
Well, there's
seen a
good
lot
targets,
of.
especially with Kyler Murray when his price started to rise when Matthew Berry got on and made him his ride or die for the season, and that's going to push him up in the fantasy football world. How about you, Steve? What did you kind of notice players you were targeting and actually did get on most of your teams?
So I ended up with a lot of Waddle, just because I had him valued higher than most people. The times I missed out on him were just active me trying to get a few new players on the team. Um, so I would kind of wait on him, see if somebody else would take him. I ended up with a lot of Saquon as well, and I think a lot of that was I ended up at most of the time at the end of drafts. I was at that 7, 8, 9 spot, so I ended up with a lot of Amon Ra and Saquon, or Jefferson and Saquon, to kind of pair up. So I wasn't targeting Saquon actively. He just where I ended up drafting a lot of with him. I ended up with a lot of him, and then no one quarterback, but I tried to target a top 7 quarterback in every draft I was in. So somewhere between Jalen Hurts and Kyler Murray um, uh, I'm blanking Josh Allen. Those were of the 3 I had a lot of shares of in just because I wanted to grab one of the top 7. After we did our few of our mocks, I didn't love my team if we waited too long.
That's interesting. So for me, one of the players is DK Metcalf. I was on him. I know that 2-3 turn, and then Terry McLaurin was a wide receiver that I ended up getting a lot of. I'm hoping for some positive touchdown boost in an offense with Jaden Daniels, which could be tough because you have the rushing ability of Jaden Daniels. I think Austin Eckler is going to be more of a thing in the red zone. I'm really interested to see how Cliff Kingsbury works at having 2 backs because hasn't had that. And when you look at his track record and working with James Conner a bit, making him a focal point, and I'm really interested to see that. But I think Terry McLaurin, when they traded Dotson, it's just they're going to feed him targets, and I think he could see double-digit targets and positive game scripts weekly. Now, when it comes to maybe players you missed out on, maybe the man crush you were not able to get, I'll start. And for me, it was Dalton Kincaid. I had talked him up a ton, and just the way I was drafting, kind of just really wanted to solidify my wide receivers. He went early. Kincaid was right there in that mix after the top 3 tight ends went. You had Kelsey Laporta going in rounds 1 and 2 a lot of times, and then people would jump on Trey McBride, and then it would kind of come down to making the decision of Mark Andrews or Dalton Kincaid, and I missed out on him, and I think that's one that I'll look back on and really be frustrated. I think more shares of Kincaid. How about you, Aaron? Was there a player that you really liked and just were not able to get enough of?
Oh yeah, and it's one that you really liked. It's like Terry McLaurin. I tried in every single draft, and I apparently waited too long on him. So it's one I was a little bit disappointed in. Another one's Jordan Love. For some reason, I didn't end up with Jordan Love.
You got some Kyler Murray though. It's not bad.
So two leagues had Jordan Love go rather high. So apparently I was waiting too long for my Jordan Love pick. So
Yeah, but you liked Jordan Love at his value. People were taking him,
exactly.
especially in our draft. He was the 5th quarterback off the board. That's not what you were trying to draft.
No. So it's like, well, I'll find value somewhere else. There'll be
Yep.
someone else.
Well, we know you got a lot of your Waddle shares, Steve, but was there someone else maybe later in drafts you were targeting early on that you missed?
Yeah, I did. I have no shares of Tyreek Hill, which I'm really disappointed in. I drafted 2 or 3 times in the top 3, and either Christian McCaffrey would fall to me and I'd take him, or Tyreek Hill would go first or second, and I was picking third. So I missed out on Tyreek Hill, and I have no shares of him, which is disappointing. I wanted to get a few more on him just because I think he will have a good season. I mean, we were talking him up the whole time. Um, that was the big one I really wanted to get a little bit more value on. The other player that I missed out on, and I did the same thing Aaron's talking about. I waited too long. I wanted to get more Malik Neighbors shares. I really think he could have a good season. I liked that he was going in that 4th, 5th round, but I seem to just always wait around too long. So I wish I would have pulled that trigger a little sooner on Malik Neighbors.
That's interesting. So we drafted right beside each other in our big league. Steve and I did. So I had the number 1 overall pick. You had number 2, and I think that was probably the one area where we each got each other. Was Josh Allen was coming back? I think it was 4th round, correct? Did you get him? So you
Yeah, I
picked Josh
took him in the 4th.
Allen, and so
Yeah.
that at that point, I had Justin Jefferson, Derrick Henry, DK Metcalf, and so I was going to go Josh Allen, Dalton Kincaid at that turn. And he took
Yeah.
Josh Allen, and I decided, I just need to draft more wide receivers. And one of those wide receivers ended up being Malik Neighbors. And so that was probably just the one area we just kind of poached each other.
Yeah, I was going to take Josh Allen, and I thought I'd be able to grab Malik Neighbors. So when you took him, it actually threw me off a little bit. And I was like, I didn't even realize that like Dalton Kincaid was still on the board. I was like, well, Mark Andrews is the next player on my list, so I'll take him. But I wish I would have paired Dalton Kincaid with Josh Allen in that scenario, just to have that duo. But I did plan to take Josh Allen, Malik Neighbors there because I wanted to get a little bit of that. So those are the 2 players I just wish I would have grabbed more of.
Yeah, and the one thing too, just looking back at all the research and the conversations we had, I was going to get a share of rookie wide receivers somehow, some way. Like I was kind of all in on this class. I know a couple times that I missed, and I was still saying, "Oh, is this player out there?" Like after I had drafted Malik Neighbors and Xavier Worthy back to back, but I was ready to get a piece of Keon Coleman, Brian Thomas Jr. Like I was all in on these young wide receivers, and especially our league. It is a keeper. You get to keep one player, but I think what we're seeing with Xavier Worthy, like these guys are explosive and they're all in pretty good situations. But the fantasy football season is behind us. What a wonderful time of year. And I will say, I hate the number 1 overall pick. Like, I can't handle it. I didn't pick Christian McCaffrey number 1 overall. He was sitting there on the board. I went Justin Jefferson. There's no way to spin it. Like Christian McCaffrey is going to have a better season than Justin Jefferson. But for me sitting here doing a fantasy football show with you guys, talking fantasy football, people asking me fantasy football questions, the one thing I can't handle is having the number 1 overall pick. That's twice I've messed it up.
I don't think you messed it up. I think you're the classic overthinker. You thought too much about everything that was happening instead of just going, you know what? I just need to worry about my team. You're doing everything we told everybody else not to do, right? Just focus on your team. Don't worry about what's happening in front of you. Have your players ready. And every time you get into that spot, you just pick your spot. So, even for me, so I have to admit, when you took Malik Neighbors, it got me, right? And we always say, don't let a pick surprise you. And I just had no reason to think once you took Terry McLaurin, you were going to take another receiver. So when you said Malik Neighbors, I was like,
On you. Do you know
right?
who I am?
Yeah,
Do you know who I am?
But that's the point, right? Like even us, we're gonna get frazzled in a draft, and so we can tell you don't make that mistake, don't make that mistake. But if you do make that mistake, just make sure you recover from it quickly. And but we all make those things like in a draft. You can say, I mean, that was my 17th draft I had done, and I still got frazzled. Yes, I'm in 17 fantasy leagues this season.
Well, it
It
also
happens.
like it's the leagues you're doing. Like, because this league is why we're doing a fantasy football show.
Yeah.
Right now, we've been best friends since high school. Like, this is super competitive. We all want our names on that trophy, and I think some of that gets into your mind. Like, yes, it's just fantasy football, but you're competitive amongst your friend group, and I think that does change. There's some drafts you probably do that. Yeah, you're doing a draft, but you don't care. Like, this is the one that, like, we won it. Like, Aaron's a champion right now. He's carrying that trophy around, and it's real when you have this much fun doing it, but you get in your head, and I definitely get in my head with the number 1 overall pick. Like, I don't like it.
Well, it's also in person. And I don't know, it's a lot easier to frazzle people in person. I watch it happen every year, and I just laugh when somebody like I'm watching somebody and I'm talking to them, and then they do something, and I'm like, yep, kind of saw that coming. Like everybody gets a little frazzled. We saw it, on that Keith pick, right? That in the first round, he got mad at Mike and Joe for taking his pick. Yeah, it's those little things. We all get frazzled in a draft, and a live draft makes it worse because then your friends are sitting there talking. You're like,
And they can become not your friends really quickly. And if
oh yeah, for sure.
I know I was
Yeah, I was talking so much shit to you
for getting on to me about trades and stuff. I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah.
He's not even started, and we're already picturing about this stuff. But I love it. It was now it's waiver wire season, and we'll have to get into it. And speaking of waiver wire season, I want to discuss some ways we can look at not just players that we can pick up, but how to make some of these sit-start decisions. So it's week 1, and keep it simple. You drafted these players for a reason. But another thing I want to throw out there, and something I'm going to try a little bit more of this year, I want to get your guys' thoughts on this, is not just the over-under in a game. So when you look at the score, you have your favorite, Atlanta -3, over-under is 47.5 points. But getting specific with it and looking at the team totals in that. And you can Google that. You can find those things online, pretty easy. Just put like week 1 NFL team totals and get the specific team total. So like this week, the Detroit Lions have the highest total on the board, 20.5 points they're projected to score in their matchup against the Rams. You look at the Bills, 27 points, Dolphins, 26.5 points. And I think this could be another tool to put in your toolbox when you're trying to make some of these decisions, especially wide receiver 3, flex play, RB2, is find not just high over-unders, but check out implied team point totals, because this is a good game script for the Lions. And yeah, we know who you're going to start there, but you could go down and be looking at the Seahawks and be like, oh, they have the 11th highest point total, and maybe Jackson Smith and Jigba is someone you think about flexing in this situation, being a wide receiver 3, because Pat Surtain is going to see a lot of DK Metcalf. I'm just curious what do you guys think about that? All the information we get, but finding different ways to try to break some of those really tough decisions that we all have weekly on the sit-start game.
That's honestly why I started Christian Watson in my flex this week, was because the over-under on the game was higher than the over-under for – it was between Christian Watson and Deontay Johnson for me. And the over-under on the Green Bay game was higher. So I'm going to take the chance on – Vegas is usually right. Like, they're within a few points of an over-under.
They're very good.
Yeah, I'm going to use them to my advantage. Let them do all the research, and then I'm going to use it as my way of going, okay, well, that's the point total, so I'm going to start that guy.
Yeah, and it's something that I do look at times, not all the time, but when I'm getting down to like who should I actually play, because you have your lineup locked and you're looking at that last, your flex, something you want to change. You kind of look into what the games look like, what they're projecting on points, so stuff like that. It is helpful, and generally, those points do come. Vegas is they're great at what they do. So the house never loses. So
Yeah, so you can find like specific implied team totals. So you have, the game over under, but you can look up, the team totals, and that leads me into my next thing. I've been preaching, keep it simple. It's week 1. Don't overthink your team. But I've kind of backed into this with Dak Prescott. I ended up taking Dak Prescott in the 9th round of the draft without really considering the schedule. I wasn't really focused on the schedule at that point in time when I'm putting my team together. I kind of draft my team and then look at it. And then it was, Cowboys at the Cleveland Browns. The Browns at home were a really good defense. And speaking of point totals, which we're just discussing, the Cowboys have they're tied for the 4th lowest team total at 19 points with the Panthers this week. And so I'm sitting here, keep it simple, start the players that you drafted. I made a change and I went to the waiver wire. I picked up Jared Goff. So talk some people off the ledge. How much should we be looking at our team week 1 outside of injuries? You should always be paying attention to that, always up until 10:30 at least Mountain Time, wherever you are. How you guys feeling right now about putting your team together? Are you staring at it too much? Do you like the keep it simple philosophy? Because like I already made a change, before we even got to the weekend. I'll start with just you, Aaron. Just kind of your week 1 philosophy.
Week 1, technically, I never really looked too deep into it because there's just so much X factor to everything. Everything's coming in. Some things haven't been done. We'll see where it goes. I don't typically read in too deep, but I do get where you're at, JJ, because nobody likes to lose week 1. It's like nobody wants to take that loss. So, I can accept it and move on, but it's like no one wants to. Your season, you get that win the first week, you're feeling a lot better already. So it's like I understand where you're at with that, JJ, but I usually don't on my philosophy. I'm playing my stars how they drafted, and if something comes up like injury, some news, I might change it out. But I'm rolling with what I got.
I think it's
Yeah.
Steve. That kind of goes to why you were top 7 quarterback this year. Like you didn't want to kind of be left with these decisions even week 1, looking at these QB 10 plus guys, starting them right now.
A little bit. So I think I had different strategies depending on the league. So I did a few 2 quarterback leagues. I wanted to make sure I got 2 in the top, 16 or whatever. And if I did a 12 quarterback league or a 12 team league, I was a lot more okay with taking a quarterback deeper just because then I'd had a better team overall. But in our 10 team league, I definitely wanted to get one of the top 7 for that reason. I didn't want to play quarterback roulette because there can be a big difference. However, the only time I'm ever looking at making a change week 1 is if I see somebody a sleeper that I'm like, you know what, I really want to get that guy on my team before he goes off, right? I don't usually make that change because then I look at my team and go, oh, well, I don't want to drop this player because I think they could do it too. And I don't want to drop that player because I think they could do it too. So I usually talk myself off of it, but I think about it. Like, don't get me wrong. I've stared at my lineup and been like, do I want to pick up Bucky Irving? Well, I have to drop Jalen Wright. Well, I don't want to do that. Do I want to pick up, like, I even thought, should I pick up Isaiah Likely to back up with Mark Andrews just in case? I don't want to drop Jalen Polk. Like, sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong, but I don't want to drop a player if I'm not like next week after I've seen a week, then I might be like, yeah, I'm okay dropping that player and taking a chance on this guy because I don't think this guy, he didn't play much. So I'm willing to take that chance. But that first week, I don't want to make changes. I drafted those players because I thought there was an upside. I don't want to start going like, well, what if there's not an upside?
Yeah, and it's tough because there's been so many times where I've dropped players in the first month. Like I'm like, oh no, nothing's happened. That's a dead weight, and then they turn into what exactly I thought they would, and that's literally one of the worst things to see is your player doing well and someone else's
last season I had Devon Achane and Dalton Kincaid in a keeper league and another keeper league, and I dropped both of them after 2 weeks. And then somebody else picked them up and then kept them. And I'm sitting there going, "Oh, I had those guys in the 15th and 14th round."
I know. I
You
picked
know,
up
so
Achan off of waivers last year, and literally took me to the playoffs. Just from
Well,
this point. So
this is a good segue. No, I talk about looking at your roster week one. It's impossible to be patient because we're hit over the head with, as you guys said, the Kevin Ogletree game. We're hit over the head with, this is the guys you have to grab off the waiver wire right away. You have to go out there and spend 40% of your fab budget on these guys. How do you feel about that? Because it's easy to say, oh yeah, Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, and you don't want to miss out on them, but then dropping a Achane and Kincaid. So how do you go about it? Do you just YOLO it? Because I've been that guy, and I know there's been a strategy for some people in our league that immediately would pick up someone that I would drop early in the season. So how do you weight that in your mind of trying to jump on what could be the next Puka Nacua versus not giving up on some of these young guys that you said, Steve, like we drafted them for a reason, especially with the young players?
I'm trying a different strategy this year. So, and this is what I would do if I had a kicker or defense as well. I'm going to drop my kicker or defense for one of those guys, and I'm going to let them. I'm going to play a week without a kicker or defense, or I'm going to play a week like we have IDPs. I will play a week without a defensive lineman, and say, okay, I'm punting on those 4 points, but I want to see if one of these guys goes off, and if not, then I'll adjust accordingly. So this year I am going to play it a little bit differently. I'm going to say, okay, I'm not going to have this many points because our league doesn't have a penalty. Now there are leagues that require a valid starting lineup, and if you're in one of those leagues, then maybe you need to make a different adjustment and go, okay, unless I really believe these guys are going to be there or be that guy, then I'll drop whoever it may be. But for me this year, I'm dropping defenses or kickers, and I'm gonna put that guy we think it could be on my bench for a week. And if he is that guy, I will keep him, and I will figure out who to drop from there.
That's a really interesting strategy.
I know I've done that before, but it's been a while. I will say that.
And like you said, you can get away with it early in the season, a couple games. And you're right, there's certain leagues that you need to field a valid roster, which you should do. It's still fantasy football. We want to have fun. We want to be in competitive leagues with everyone playing for something. But unless like late in the season, if there's maybe a collusion going on or someone trying to tank, like I think that would be addressed by your commissioner there. But early in the season, if you want to take a chance not with a kicker or IDP or a defense, I do think that's really fascinating because that rolls into watching the watch list. And you guys just talked about some of the things that you were addressing. Do you want to pick up likely, when you get a chance to take a step back and look at that waiver wire post draft, who are some names that you could get ahead of? And if you have that space, like for me, I already used it. I had late in the draft, right before we started going to IDPs, I didn't really know where I wanted to go, so I took Taysom Hill. It's always like, oh, he's going to be their number 2 running back. Oh, he's going to throw some passes. But then I was sitting there and I'm like, well, I just don't want to wait on that. I'm not going to play him anytime soon. And that's what I used to make my change at quarterback. I took out Dak Prescott, didn't like the matchup against Cleveland, used Jared Goff. But then seeing some of these other plays, and where this could come in handy as we watch the watch list is this T. Higgins news came out of left field. He is doubtful this weekend. And so you have Jamar Chase, who's going to be playing. You drafted Jamar Chase in the first round. You have to play Jamar Chase, but you got to figure he's going to be on a bit of a snap count. And so whether you're Jamar Chase owner or you're the T. Higgins owner, you have your bench now. It's still early in the season. But I think there's some valuable guys that you could plug and play right now if you weren't confident with your bench. Maybe you went young, wait and see, but you got to make that move of trying to get some players in right now. So I'm going to throw some names out there and see what you guys think. Like if you're a Higgins owner or someone else over the next couple of days, if another injury pops up. And I know this is a name that has been bantered about here on the 3 Dudes Fantasy Football Show, but you look at Rashid Shaheed, splash plays, number 2 target in the passing game for the Saints. They have a favorable matchup against the Carolina Panthers this weekend. He's still available in 45% of Yahoo leagues. And then also, if we all love Kyler Murray, Aaron loves him. Matthew Berry loves him. I'm sure Steve likes himself some Kyler Murray. Everyone was on Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride. Yes, locked in to Steve's passing target tree, the top 2 targets. But if Kyler Murray is going to have one of those seasons, then I'm looking at Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch. Dortch is available in 95% of leagues, Michael Wilson 85%. I might go Dortch in PPR over Wilson just to try to get somewhat of a floor this weekend. But I think those are guys right now that if you're a Higgins owner, like you could plug and play and at least find somewhat of a floor. What do you guys think?
I think I'd be more interested in Shaheed if he's available. The problem with Shaheed is he's going to have a good week this week, and then he goes into the Saints have a really tough schedule right after it because they go Cowboys, Eagles, Falcons, Chiefs. So maybe one more good game in that stretch right there. I do believe I liked Kyler Murray. I like Kyler Murray because he runs. It's kind of what we saw with Lamar Jackson, right? Nobody else had a good game besides Isaiah Likely and Lamar Jackson or what we would consider a good game for where we drafted them. So I like Kyler Murray for that reason, and it's why I like Trey McBride. It's also why I like Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm expecting a lot out of Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm expecting Trey McBride, like a tight end, if they get 10 to 12 points a week, you're stoked. It's just a lower floor. So I'm not expecting a ton from Wilson and Dortch. So
Well, we're not talking about the season.
they're good flyers. Well, but there's a lot of other receivers
Higgins
you could
owner?
look at.
All right, I like that. That's why I wanted to talk about
Yeah.
curveball for people.
Well,
maybe you
so
went heavy,
then,
got just a bunch of running backs on your bench, and you got to do something along those lines.
so for me, like I'm a big Jalen Polk fan. I've talked about him all off season. Or if you're the T Higgins owner, maybe look at Jermaine Burton, right? Like pick up the backup for the Bengals. Somebody over there is going to have to do something. It could be Trenton Irwin. It could be Jermaine Burton. One of them will have to catch something. I mean, honestly, with both Jamar Chase on a snap count and T Higgins not playing, those two might have big games. Like somebody over there is going to catch. We believe in Joe Burrow. Like I said, I still think Jalen Polk could have a big season. Those are the flyers I want to take, but I'm more interested in taking flyers on the younger guys because they're young. They usually come in a little hot, and we have no expectations for them. So I don't mind dropping those guys early if they aren't doing well, but I want to get, a younger player. I mean, and the reason I keep coming back to Jalen Polk is he's the 37th overall pick. Like, he's still a great receiver, and we still think he could do great things. So, and he's the number one target on his team. If you want to do a floor play, Adam Thielen might be a floor play. Second target in Carolina.
Yeah,
that's that reputation.
PPR fair. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it without Higgins, Jamar Chase on a possible snap count, it's like, yeah, I'm open to anything if I don't have it on my bench. So it's like if I feel, like Shaheed should be a decent play. Put him in there, like start him.
Yeah, like Shaheed's one of those guys that 2 plays 50 yards and a touchdown is possible. In this matchup against Carolina, and the Cardinals is just more talking about those guys because there's so much hype with Kyler Murray, and we've both seen them perform. And Arizona is a team that I think they're going to let Kyler Murray throw the football, and so it's interesting. But just watching the watch list, and you mentioned a name earlier, Steve, was Bucky Irving.
Yeah.
I look at Rashad White and Tampa Bay, and some of the numbers weren't great, but the volume was incredible. And I don't think they're going to go away from the veteran early in the season. So when the news the last couple of weeks that Todd Bowles was talking about going with a hot hand approach in the offense, and they have the rookie from Oregon in Bucky Irving, I still would play White, if you draft him as a solid RB2 right away. But would this be a guy? Because you kind of brought it up. Would you listen to the coach? Would you try to get ahead of it if you had the roster spot? And what do you think about like someone like Bucky Irving?
in a lot of leagues where I had picked up Chubb or Brooks, Bucky Irving was the player I put on my team after I put those guys on IR.
Oh, the
Uh,
IR.
yeah, so Bucky Irving is a player I think who could have a big season if given the opportunity. I don't know if it'll happen. Yeah, I mean you're taking a flyer on him, but he's owned in like 20% of leagues, and those are going to be really big leagues. So he's one of those players I could see getting ahead of. The other one, and I couldn't remember who it was, but I have it written down here as a player that maybe just keep an eye on is Luke McCaffrey for
Yeah.
the wide receiver out of Washington, because they did get rid of Jahan Dotson, and somebody's got to catch it. So I don't know if it's him, but might be another flyer. Those are flyers that I am willing to sit on for a week, but not much longer.
Yeah, I think
Right.
this is
So
when you go through your draft and you get done and you take a chance back. Like I already have like 15 guys on my watch list
yeah.
that I'm not rostering them right now, but want to make sure that I'm keeping an eye on them. And I think with some of these young guys, maybe you swap them out with a veteran after the fact. And you're done with the draft, you can see what happened the last few rounds. I think Bucky Urban is definitely an interesting one in that. And you mentioned Jalen Polk. I think he's probably available in still a lot of leagues for people, and he's a guy that you really like. And I know this doesn't affect starters unless you're just in a gigantic 2 quarterback league. But Russell Wilson is kind of trending more towards doubtful this weekend. They're still dealing with that calf injury, and Mike Tomlin wanted Russell Wilson to be a thing. Like he wanted him to be a thing, and I don't think Russell Wilson or Justin Fields at this point changes the offense much. Like you're kind of getting what you're getting out of Pickens. Harris and I think Warren are going to find their grooves, but Justin Fields, like if he's playing, you know what he's going to do. He's going to run around a lot. And if you're in one of those situations where maybe you're in a 12-team league, 2 quarterback league, you don't like the matchup potentially, like with me with Dak Prescott, what do you guys think about just YOLO on Justin Fields if he's the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers this weekend? What say you, Aaron?
That is a wild question to ask me because I've been out on Justin Fields for so long. If you're in a 2 quarterback league, you need a quarterback. His upside is there for his running, so you can roll the dice on him. But I don't know. Maybe it's just personal bias with Justin Fields. I don't.
There's a reason that he was QB2 for the Steelers, that Russell Wilson and Justin Fields were pretty much garage sale pickups for Pittsburgh. We understand, but Fields, man, he always just brings you in because you're just like, man, if I get 100 rushing yards and a touchdown and he's just average passing the football, that's the intrigue when it comes to fantasy. And I know we're talking about some really week one off the wall scenarios. But what do you think of that offense, Steve, with Russell Wilson versus Justin Fields? And I know a player that has been talked up a lot has been George Pickens.
Yeah, I think if Justin Fields starts, it moves my ranking on George Pickens down a little bit. I actually like what you're saying there with Justin Fields because he can run and he will run, right? Like
Oh yeah.
you're not drafting him to be a passer. You're saying, hey, you give me 100 yards rushing and a touchdown, that's 16 points for my quarterback. Like that's if I'm looking that deep, that's a great day for a quarterback, right? So yeah, I agree with you. I think Justin Fields is a thought. It's something I'm not thinking about, right? But yeah, it hurts George Pickens. I think it kind of hurts Najee and Jalen Warren a little bit. I think it pulls everybody else on the roster down a little bit.
I would agree, Steve.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I would start Justin Fields over Russell Wilson for fantasy. I just wouldn't want it for real football.
Yeah. There's nothing I like about that Steelers offense for real football or fantasy this season. But we're talking some off the wall stuff. It's what you have to do is even when your draft is done and your team is set, like these are the last moments to take a step back. Maybe just look at that waiver wire real quick and see if there's a position you want to swap out. See if maybe there's a young guy that everyone overlooked that maybe you can put on your roster before you get into the waiver wire order and, of course, the bidding war with the free agent budgets. So with that being said, I want to do a little season-long question for you guys. And we're going to be hitting here weekly, giving the hot takes, talking football, just having fun with fantasy. But I want to do your favorite 5. And I'm looking at the over-under team win totals this season. The 5 bets that you like to go over or under from NFL teams this season. We can keep a running tally at the end of the year. And we can do some of these bigger questions at the end of episodes as well when we wrap things up for the week. But we're doing a season-long one right now. I'll get it started. And a number that I really like, I got the over on the Detroit Lions. They're sitting at 9.5. These odds from Bet 365. I think Detroit, so many favorable scenarios with them playing indoors the entire season. Almost thing is just 3 games outdoors. We know Jared Goff is so comfortable in those situations. I like the Lions over 9.5 wins this season. That's my first favorite 5 bet. Steve, what do you got?
So I agree with you on that one. That was actually one of mine.
Take one. All right, put you down for Detroit.
Yes, but I went and looked at the lower teams a little bit more. I had the Washington Commanders over their 5.5 games. So I actually think they're going to end up with 7 wins this season.
There's 2 on the board, the Lions and Commanders over. Anything jumping out to you, Aaron?
These ones are actually pretty tough. I'm going to go under on something. I'm going to go under 9.5 with the Buffalo Bills.
Ooh.
I think the Bills are gonna stumble a lot harder than people are thinking. I want to see Miami offensively. I think there's been some inconsistency offense throughout the preseason. Watching them, Stephon Diggs already being upset. It's not Stephon Diggs, excuse me. Keon Coleman. Why am I thinking of the Texans? Keon Coleman kind of been talked down a little bit. It's like, is he there? Who is it going to be? Curtis Samuel, Shakir, all that stuff. It's like it's been a little interesting to watch the Bills offense. So I'm going to go under on them.
That's a spicy one. The Bills under 9.5. My next one, you're going to like this. There's that Mark Brunell jersey behind you. I got the over on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Their win total is 8.5. I'm going to take the over. This is the division that's going to be really tight. It is going to be super competitive. But I still think Trevor Lawrence is that dude. It's a team that I think is going to find a more consistent rhythm throughout the schedule. And I think they're going to be battling the Houston Texans to win that division. And I think you're looking at 9-10 win teams. And there's a chance that 2 teams from that division make the playoffs. That's what I'm expecting with Houston and Jacksonville this season. So I'm taking the over. How do you feel about that, Mr. Jacksonville, Aaron Hernandez?
I like it. There's been some hype, looking at Jacksonville coming into the season, especially within the last week. I think it was Eric Dunn, Mr. Jaguar out there, one of the big influencers. He's real high on us getting another winning season and winning this division. It'll be another back-to-back winning seasons, which kind of doesn't really happen too much here in Jacksonville for that team. So,
but it should. When you got Trevor Lawrence, you gave him a bag.
When everyone's healthy.
9 wins. Got to get 9 wins there. So I got the over on Detroit and Jacksonville so far. We know Steve likes the Lions. He likes the over on the Commanders at 5.5. What do you got next?
My next under, which is hard because it's my second favorite coach in the league, is Mike Tomlin and the Pittsburgh Steelers under their 8.5 wins, which would be his first losing season as a Steelers head coach.
No, that was a good one. I like that one because that was one of mine.
Yeah, I don't believe that between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, they've done some amazing things with Kenny Pickett, and that defense can carry. I can't look at that team and say, yep, they're going to win 9 games. Like, they've done it forever. I don't believe it. So that's my under.
That's another one that I'm right there with you. That would be my third one. I have Pittsburgh under as well.
So three of us
Want to
agree
jump
on
on
that
that
one.
train?
Yeah, I was like, absolutely.
All
That
on
was
the
one
under.
of that was one of mine.
So Aaron, you got the Bills and Pittsburgh under. What's your third one?
The
Just go right down.
third one. Oh
We got this is
man,
the favorite five, man. You got to pick
Uh,
5 of these win totals. We're gonna
do
see who has
do
the
I
tiebreaker at the end of the season.
want to go another under?
Wing on the losing.
There's two teams that I'm split on. I'm looking at your
We'll
list,
make
and
them
it's
two.
like
We gotta pick 5.
the Chargers. I'm going under. I'm going under that. I don't know. It'll be an interesting season, but I think it's going to be just slightly disappointing. So where they're
Justin
at was
Herbert
7.5.
Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence are like in that same boat. It's like you're
Yes.
that dude. We think you have the talent. We've seen it. You flashed it. Then you gotta rise all ships. And this is not the most talented skill positions for the Chargers, but you have the best coach he's ever had in his career, Jim Harbaugh. They're going to run the football a whole heck of a lot. And I know it's just Josh Palmer. It's just Lad McConkey. Not a lot there. You got to figure out if Quentin Johnson can be a thing, the first round pick from last season. But if you're going to be one of those guys, you got to get it done. But I think a lot of people are starting to feel the way you are, Aaron, with it and saying, all right, you're talented, but, and don't see a high ceiling there for the Chargers.
For me, there's too many question marks to have. What we're 7.5, so I see it below. So
We got the under train going for Aaron. So Steve, you got Detroit over. You got Washington over. You got Pittsburgh under. What do you got next?
So I have 2 left. I have the Los Angeles Rams over.
Ooh.
They're 7.5. I think they are playoff bound. So I have them at 10 wins.
10-win team. I like that from the Rams. I'm going to give you my next one, and I'm feeling pretty good about it right now because I think you're seeing the explosiveness and this game that's going on in Brazil. It's all of a sudden they're just finding the end zone like crazy. But I'm expecting a big bounce back season from Philadelphia. I got the over. They're at 9.5. I think the thing that's going to help them throughout the season is Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator, Vic Fangio, the defensive coordinator. It was a mess last year, and they were a good team. They went to the Super Bowl, and they lost both their coordinators to head coaching positions. And Nick Sirianni couldn't get it figured out. Well, he got it figured out. He has veteran coordinators in there, and I like the over for the Philadelphia Eagles this season.
Christian Watson touchdown, by the way.
You're on it. You're absolutely on fire right now if you look at your fantasy football team with Barkley and Christian Watson. But I do like the Eagles overall, though, this season. I think that they're a team that should be good. And I think one that I didn't pick it on my favorite 5, but with the way the Packers are going back and forth, the Eagles, that would have probably been a pretty good over. But let's get your last ones, guys. Steve, your 5th one.
My 5th, yeah. So my 5th one, I'm taking the homer. I'm taking the Dolphins over. I don't know if that's a good bet. That's just totally me being a homer pick. Like, whatever. At this point, I'm taking it. I think the Dolphins have a good chance to win. They have an 8.5 win total. When I look through their schedule, I see a realistic chance to 10 or 11 wins, with I think 10 being their lowest, and I believe 13 being their highest, which I don't think will happen. But I can see a path to 13. I think 11 is where they end, and I think they don't win the division, but I do think they make the wild card.
Who do you think wins that division?
I still have Buffalo. Josh Allen is the Dolphins' daddy, so you have to beat daddy before you can say you're the division winner. So Aaron might disagree, but you have to show it to me before I can say you're the division winner. And Miami stumbled last year at the end, and you know what? They don't play Buffalo at the end. They play the Jets, but they have to prove they can beat Buffalo. They play them Thursday night. So
what?
My mind will change if that happens. If the Dolphins can beat Buffalo, then I will say, okay, the Dolphins
can. Let's yeah, of course. Just wait and see. You can do that with everything.
Yeah. But that's why I'm saying I think they're over still.
You gotta
wait and see. Think they're going to win the division.
You don't make money waiting and see.
It's going to be a competitive division, but I still like Miami out of those. The top 3.
Not
We're
if
not
you
going to mention New England.
to the ESPN, it's all about the Jets.
Like, we got Rodgers.
Rodgers.
It's because Greeny's there.
So do you have 2 left, Aaron? We gotta get 2
Uh,
more from you.
I don't know.
Yes, Aaron has 2.
Perhaps. All right, we're gonna go 1. We'll go an over for the Las Vegas Raiders at 5.5. Like last year, they were an 8-win team, going through the turmoil of quarterback. Now they got the quarterback locked in. Their defense is still fairly good, and I think the Raiders will maybe win a few more games there. Definitely, I can see them at 7.
Boy, Gardner Minshew.
Yeah. And the next one, let's see, where am I at on this list? There's another good one. Oh yeah, Chicago 7.5. That one's a really tough one, and I wanted to see before I say what it's going to be. What do you guys think of Chicago at 7.5?
You're cheating. I'll let JJ go first. I didn't look at that one.
This is where I am very conflicted on Chicago because CJ Stroud was amazing last year, and people just expect that now. And they're thinking the Bears are going to be a 10-win team because of Caleb Williams. But if I was putting money, I might go under.
I am an under, but I don't want to be an under with Chicago. I'd like to see Chicago get back to winning, just to see the Bears be good. It's been a while, but
I think Vegas hit this one on the head.
It's right on
I
the
feel
dot.
like they're 7 or an 8-win team. And so it's kind of like, even if you pick the under, you're hoping for 7. If you pick the over, you're saying 8. Like this is why I didn't pick this one, because I was like the
That
other
one's
games I felt like
one's
a
one of the
3-game
hard
difference.
ones.
That one I'm like, why would you ever pick that one? Like, you're just making life hard to make life hard.
Yes.
That's why
So that's mine.
there's those giant buildings in Las Vegas and those fantastic sports books, because this ain't easy.
We'll say if you talk to any Bears fans, they're going to the Super Bowl, so that's why I'm going under.
Yeah, so my last one is, it's betting a lot on an Achilles, and it's not Aaron Rodgers. It is Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons over 9.5 wins. It is a huge total, but I think they're going to run away from Tampa Bay, Carolina, and New Orleans in that division. Yeah, it's division games. It's going to be tight, but I think they could win 5 games right there in their division. And then the non-conference schedule, offensively, Kirk Cousins, who's getting a good report from Bijan Robinson. They're a team that they have nice pieces on the defense. Kyle Pitts he's going to be on and off the injury report, but all I'm concerned about is Kirk to Drake London, Kirk to Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier getting a couple touchdowns. And I'm going the over on the Falcons. I think that's a 10-win football team.
JJ, I actually think they will win the division at 8 and 9.
8 and 9, so they go to under 500 division winner. Kind of keeping with the theme we've seen with the AFC South recently.
Yeah, I just want to.
It could be.
I love when that happens. Like when Seattle did it, and then they beat the Saints in their wild card game. I just love when that happens. And that division is so bad that I think you're probably right, but I don't know.
It's which Achilles do you believe in? The older one in Aaron Rodgers, or the slightly younger one in Kirk Cousins?
But at least Kirk Cousins is in a worse division.
Yeah.
Like your thought process is right there, where you're going against the Dolphins and the Bills if you go with Aaron Rodgers.
Oh.
And the Patriots, which I don't know what they are, but
Nobody does.
Well, the one thing we know about the Patriots is Jalen Polk is apparently going to be the offensive rookie of the year, because if he's not on your roster, you are not winning a fantasy football championship.
And Jalen Wright, because I drafted both those guys, and I have to think I'm the best at fantasy football.
You are,
just so I can beat Aaron.
I got the target on my back, so
you do have a target on your
back. One thing I want to get into before we wrap this one up, and as we continue to babble on the 3 Dudes Fantasy Football Show. Speaking of, do you like your draft? It hit me. If Aaron Hernandez was a manager, he would never hire kids right out of college. Like you'd walk into his office and there'd be experienced people there that have been there for a long time, and there'd never be any interns around. There's never be anyone that just graduated because he's about experience. And it won him a fantasy football championship last year. And again, I was looking at his roster this season. It's Devontae Adams, it's Amari Cooper. These guys have been there, done that, and we're always looking at the next young hot thing. We're like Bill Belichick. We want the 20-year-old on our Insta face. Aaron's like, no, no, no. I want my MySpace back. What do you think of the champion, Mr. Aaron Hernandez? And he's just about experience. He doesn't want to mess with no rookies. He doesn't wait on it. He's getting proven commodities in the NFL on his fantasy football team.
I mean, he took Kyron Williams. He's young.
He is.
He took Travis Etienne.
I took my risks where they were there, but
they're
they also they I would say yes, they are established. So like, I'll put it.
We're talking
I'll put
Devontae
it into.
Adams. Like they might be young in terms of like they're not 30 years old, but we know what ETN is. What is this, year 4 now in the league?
Okay, I get what you're saying. I
Debo
understand your premise.
Samuel.
How
Calvin Ridley.
What we'll put? I'll ask you this, JJ,
Amari
since you
Cooper's
drafted
like-
young players. Malik Neighbors, what yardage touchdowns do you see for him this season?
Neighbors interest me as high as he did because of undisputed number 1 target on his team and being the second wide receiver off the board. That's why even though I talked up, say, Keon Coleman, but I would wait for him more about 8-9 because he wasn't the prospect caliber. Is not an undisputed target in me. And a little bit of that is you're taking a chance. And I think your strategy is really interesting. And that's why I did
Anthony Richardson.
After he took Kyler Murray.
All right. Damn it. You got me there.
Yeah. So he had his 6-year guy.
I took my I took my risk there.
And I think Anthony Richardson actually in your starting lineup this week. So
I'm looking at his team right now. You're right. Like Amari Cooper, Evan Ingram, Travis Etienne, Kyron Williams, Calvin Ridley, Debo Samuel, Devontae Adams.
No, he took young players. He took young players on his bench, but guys that he's not going to have to have the question of starting. Like he's not going to be like, oh, do I go? Oh, Malik Neighbors or Terry McLaurin. Like boom, you have your guys. Your young guys could have huge opportunity. If something happens, Trey Benson, Xavier Legette, if he kind of is Debo Samuel 2.0. But I really thought it was interesting because it was opposite of a lot of people do. We try to find that next hot thing, jump on those rookies, and you're like, I just won a championship. I want guys that I know what I'm getting. And was that like cautious, or is that just something that like happened?
A little bit of both. It's a little cautiousness, and it kind of ends up that way. There's proven commodities that I'm more comfortable on and leaning on than kind of waiting to see the shakedown of how these rookies are going to fit into the offense, how involved they are. Like Neighbors, do you see Neighbors getting like 1,000 yards? Where would you see his yardage? Because this is.
Yeah, I don't, and I think the reason I was more comfortable doing that because he's essentially my flex right now, and so the way I constructed my team, I have 3 veteran wide receivers. I got Jefferson, DK Metcalf, and Terry McLaurin before I went rookie wide receiver. So I'm kind of hedging myself there, and more of what you're talking about. But I think when I'm looking at that, maybe I was a little too concerned about next year as opposed to this year.
Yeah, I'll say like for that, like drafting, having, someone young you can get late round on a keeper, that's definitely there. It's like, I'll even use this example. Like, if Neighbors got 800 yards, 8 touchdowns, do you feel good or bad?
I would feel good. But, there's always those little differences in how we construct our team. Because I went so wide receiver heavy, I'm kind of banking more wide receiver 3 flex guy. But I think, 808 touchdowns, feeling pretty nice.
Right. It's a no. Were you gonna say something, Steve?
Yeah, well, like Neighbors is an example of a player like Marvin Harrison Jr. that like I'm high on because I think his target share is there. I actually think of Neighbors, and the reason I liked him so much is he kind of reminded me, uh, or I thought he could have an Odell Beckham Jr. type rookie season, right? Like 130 targets, 90 catches, 1,300 yards is his ceiling. But I think his floor is 70 catches, 1,000 yards, and 5 touchdowns. So I
And
was
that
high
would
on Neighbors.
probably that's top 30 production. So
I was high on Neighbors because of his head coach. He's proven that he likes to feed one target. He doesn't care who you are. He will whoever it is, I'm going to feed it to him. And Saquon Barkley's gone. Like they're going to be behind in a lot of games. I think he's just going to have one of those seasons. I was a little more nervous on Xavier Worthy and those guys, just because there's so many more targets to feed, right? But I liked Neighbors as a player. It's the same reason I like Marvin Harrison Jr. as a player, right? I looked at those
Right.
guys and said, those guys are just, I want to take those guys. I didn't end up with any of them, so I can't really say I wanted to take those guys. I kind of approached with more your strategy than anything, but that was my thought process. So when you were asking like why are you high on Neighbors, I saw Neighbors as Odell Beckham Jr. 2.0.
Right, and that's totally fine. That's what we're looking for. But let's say like Neighbors ends up 71 receptions, 800 yards, and 8 touchdowns. It's like that stat I just wrote is Jacoby Myers, and it's like I drafted him in the 14th.
yeah,
So it's like you're able to get production from a wide receiver too. That's not even on some people's boards, and we're drafting rookies rather high for production that's, when you look at it that way, is kind of not sexy in a sense. So it's kind of what side of the line do you fall on? And if you're having to draft for another season, that's something that's completely valid. But it's like at the same time, when I go kind of veteran like that, it's you're able to, everyone's hyped on rookies all the time, all the way up. It's pushed all the way up. It's like I think I talked to Steve about our draft. It's like, if I kept Christian McCaffrey, it's like I probably would have had to draft Marvin Harrison Jr. And it's like, looking at how our league works, all that stuff, it's like his value, he's gonna be good, he's gonna be great, but where he's at, it's like I can't keep him where he's drafted in our league. So it's like,
You're
no,
drafting
kind
him
of,
at his ceiling, not his
it's
floor.
absolute max. Like he is maxed out. So it's like, it's kind of, when you're looking into the future, it's kind of one where it's like that pick will help my team, but it also really could hurt. He's going in the second round, so it's like,
Yeah, you can't win your league in the second round, but you can definitely lose it. I get you.
So looking at that draft style, how I do, that's kind of the way I look at things. I like rookies? Yeah, absolutely. It's like I love Justin Jefferson coming in when he came in as a rookie, and I was all about it. So it's like, there are times where I'll grab, and it's like, if they hit and you believe, then you're gonna feel good when they do. So it's like,
Justin,
if you're
we are drafting those guys off of those guys, right? Justin Jefferson was a 13th round pick when we drafted him, and now everybody coming in the
now
league.
look at
You're
where the
right,
rookies are going.
right? Like Jamar
yeah,
Chase and Jalen Waddle went in the 6th and 8th round in leagues when they came into the league, and Justin Jefferson went in the 13th. And we would have never in a million years drafted a rookie in the top 3 rounds. I mean, we weren't drafting rookies in top 3 rounds in 2020, so in
It's been like
2021.
really the last 2 years where there's
Yeah.
like this
And this is
class.
the first year I can ever remember a rookie being in the 2nd round.
I know. And then I'm
And
like, when I talked to you about that, I'm like,
besides running
what
backs.
is going on? It's like literally that meme of Tim Robinson from,
Well,
what
like
is going
Bijan went
on
in the
here?
first
What
round
what have
last
they
year, and
done to us?
right, Bijan went in the first round last year, and I thought that was crazy. So I mean, you're right. Like we've kind of moved on to these like college tape will translate, but that's not necessarily true. We are drafting a lot at value or at what we think their ceiling is. Like I said in a previous episode, we drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. to perform like Puka Nacua did last year. So if he doesn't perform at that level, he's a bust.
So many are going to be so upset with him, and it will be it'll be a little sad because it's like he is the next great. So, and if he's not exceeding expectations, there's going to be a sour taste for a lot of people. So, but that's
we should listen because this man won our championship last year in our league, and he
listen
has
to me.
a valuable strategy. And I'm glad we got into that because that was something that was on my mind, and immediately post draft when we're all sit there and we spend the 2 hours after the draft just looking at the draft board, talking about it. It was something that really jumped out to me, and I'm glad we were able to talk about that today. And we have so much. It's just week one. There was one game in the books, one game going on in Brazil, going back and forth, and Christian Watson doesn't have the yards that I need to get the hire, but he's got the touchdown. So good job if you have him in your lineup. Reed is going off right now. We'll have so much to react to next week in the Three Dudes Fantasy Football Show. We're just going to try to keep it fun, talk about our league, hopefully it's stuff that matters to you, digest everything in the fantasy football world. And are you ready? Your lineups are in. I'm going to go mess with my team some more because I haven't done it enough. I didn't mess it up enough with the draft. I'm going to go do it some more.
You got this, Jay.
Like and subscribe, please, and thank you as we continue to grow this. And can you believe we've been doing this almost a year now? Let's just keep churning and burning, y'all. Keep churning and burning and having some fun. That's what fantasy football is all about, is fun with your friends, talking the smack, and trying to beat everyone in your league. But you can follow us on Instagram at 3Dudes Fantasy Football. The underscore is there, of course, on the X at 3Dudes FFS. Just having some fun, breaking it all down. And gentlemen, let's go enjoy this game in Brazil. May the fantasy odds be in your favor. But until next time, metal, peace, and love for Stephen Master and Aaron Hernandez. I'm JJ Buck. Peace.
Good luck, y'all.